we love that you came with your film. We love that you're supporting the Virginia Film Festival. And the main thing I want to say is congratulations for what you created, which it's really a lovely film in so many ways. And maybe we could just start with, do you want me to introduce you? I should maybe say something about Kevin up there. You guys all know Doc, thanks to the film.
This is your show, man. You run it any way you want.
I just want to say Kevin, who you can see on screen, was an executive producer of Friends. He was involved with In Living Color, talk about a show that was prescient and brilliant. He's directed several documentaries and has a long history with the media. And Jeff, who you can also see, has a long history of editing, producing, directing award-winning documentaries. And this background really that you both have comes to fruition in this film. It's a lovely film and it's beautifully made. And I'm going to ask you about some of that as we go along. But let me just start with, tell us the genesis. How did this movie come into being?
Well, it started at a friend's retirement party that was attended by Doc's daughter, Nancy, who I'd once worked with on a show many years ago. And, you know, when you see Nancy, of course, you're going to say, hey, how's Doc? And she says, he's great. And then, you know, I'm kind of doing some math in my head. He's great. How old is he? And I'm really not sure, you know? And so I said, well, how old is he? 90. I said, wow, is he still playing the trumpet? And she goes, yes. And I go, huh. Anybody talk about making a film with him? And it was basically there. That's how it got started.
Wow. Well, I'm glad you did it. And Doc, I'm glad you were amenable to this.
Well, I wasn't on the first moment.
No, Doc's not an easy date.
Okay, so Doc, tell us how did they win you over? What was your soft spot that they found?
Well, I just felt that Nancy always has my best interests at heart, and if Kevin and they wanted to do this, maybe I can talk them out of it. So I said, well, that's very nice of you. I appreciate it, but no, you don't want to do that. And they said, yeah, we do. And I could say, well, if we just start filming, they may change their mind and it won't hurt my feelings. But it felt good and it got better and better and better. And I love these two guys.
That's great. Well, I'm glad that you conceded and let them run with this. Doc, let me ask you a question. You know, the movie gives us a sense of you as kind of a prodigy with the trumpet. I mean, there's really clearly this kind of special talent there, and you run with it. But one thing I was wondering though, early on, were there trumpeters that inspired you, that gave you a sense of, you know, the sort of poetry and power of that instrument and that you aspired to in some way? Were you shaped by other jazz musicians when you were young?
Well, no, in the very beginning, my dad wanted me to play a violin.
Right.
And I said, no, I'm not playing a violin. And I'm, you know, like 6 or 7 years old. And he says, well, I bought a little violin for you. And he was a violin player himself. So he said, I can give you lessons and we can play together. And I said, nope, ain't doing it. And so finally he said, what would you like to play? And I said, well, I'd like to play a trombone, like the one that Wilbur Fletcher, a neighbor of ours, had. And he said, well, that's all well and good, but you can't reach the slide positions. So he said, but you know, I think Herb Clark down at the Shell service station has an old trumpet up in his attic that he played in the First World War. I'll see if he still got it. He went down to see Herb. Herb says, yeah, I still got it up there. I'll get it up for you. Next day, we picked it up, and a week later, I made my first public appearance. My dad was a wonderful musician and a very good violin player. And I wanted to be a jockey. And I knew that wasn't going to go over too well. That's what I really wanted to be. And you come to my house, and if the races are on television, I will have them on.
Doc has a special feed bag for himself when he watches the race.
Yeah.
He doesn't like to get up and go to the kitchen.
You know, I'll tell you, you're getting a little taste of a Doc Severinsen storytelling moment here.
Right.
That story about learning the trumpet when he was young and battling with his dad. Man, we had so much fun interviewing him about that. He told us a story that's this long about that. And then we got our star editor, Brad Allgood, who's in here too.
Right.
Wave, Brad, are you there? You're still framed? You
He's
live? There you are.
Yeah.
Brad is, Brad cut it down to the story you saw in the film, but I want to say something about Brad, by the way. We picked this guy as our editor, not just because he's a great editor, but he edits every day in cowboy boots with a dog at his side.
Yeah.
So we knew that he would channel Doc Severinsen every day, and he did. This is how you move in a Doc Severinsen project.
Hey, by the way, Doc, look who's here.
Oh, yeah.
You see your buddies?
Oh, boy.
Kevin, do you want to introduce them to the rest of us?
Oh, okay, sure.
Send them our way.
These are the results of another film I've just finished. It's called Narangi, and it's about the Korean dog meat industry. And these are two dogs that we rescued from the Korean dog meat industry. This is Hope over here, and this is Oscar.
Well,
And they don't care.
happy-
They don't care. They don't care
They're
about
very
us,
happy to
apparently.
be in Los Angeles
Well,
and not in
Kevin?
Korea.
you can believe this or not, but I had a dream last night about you and me talking about the dogs and the story of how you saved them from the food mill.
Mhm.
And it's strange. Here we are today talking about it.
There
a
we
good
are.
thing to be doing. So
Right.
we've got I do have a sense, as you're saying, Jeff, of the storytelling loveliness of the way these things unfold. Doc, I want to also ask you that, did you tour at all with either Benny Goodman or Tommy Dorsey?
Tommy Dorsey with exclamation marks. When I was 14, I met Tommy Dorsey, and I auditioned for him, and he was quite amused because he was expecting a grown man to show up. And somebody neglected to tell him, oh, he's just a kid from the wilds of Eastern Oregon. So he was amused when I walked in, and he said, what you got in that case there? I said, I got my cornet, Mr. Dorsey. And he said, can I play it? I said, well, sure. And I handed it to him. He opened it up. Now, Tommy Dorsey, by anything I know, is one of the all-time great trombone players, maybe the best ever. And he takes that horn out of the case, puts a mouthpiece in, and he played a very difficult classical cornet solo all the way through, didn't miss a note. And I never have recovered from that moment.
And so did you end up touring with him though? I mean, were you on the
Oh,
road
no.
with him?
I was only 14, and so he said, well, you know, I thought you were older. And so he said, I'll tell you what, though, you go back up to your hometown of Arlington, Oregon, and practice hard, and maybe you will wind up with me someday. Now, I was 14 years old, a freshman in high school. And sure enough, I did. And the first gig I played for Tommy was with Tommy's band. I'd been hired, and I showed up at the Shamrock Hotel in Houston, Texas. And Tommy didn't play the dinner music, you know. He came in later, walked in, didn't warm up, picked up his trombone, played his theme song, which is, you know, Getting Sentimental Over You. And I'm supposed to be starting my first night on the gig. And when Tommy walked out and picked up that trombone and started to play that, I burst into tears.
Oh,
And I was unable to play the first tune that we did because it's, you know, I guess it was the thing I uppermost wanted to do.
wow. There aren't that many people who can tell us Tommy Dorsey stories. And for somebody like me who grew up with a love of the Dorseys and James and Goodman and all that, it's amazing that you actually live that.
Hey, an interesting thing about that, you mentioned Harry James, Tommy, Jimmy Dorsey, and other bands. So, you know, there were so many of them. And I wound up playing with just about all of them.
Wow.
And there was never a time that I didn't think, how lucky can you get?
That's amazing. You know, one thing that's interesting about that you were around people. Let's put it this way. One of the jokes that would go on The Tonight Show had to do with people drinking, people smoking. You never came across as somebody who refused to imbibe in different things. On the other hand, those of us who love jazz know that there's lots of stories of jazz musicians who have tragic, horrible endings related to drugs. And I'm wondering, you clearly found a way to not be a Puritan, but at the same time, not to go down the road that a lot of great jazz musicians went down. And I was wondering if you could talk about how you manage that and the difficulties of being in a world where serious drugs were plentiful and toxic.
Well, I was still in high school when I went on the road with my first band. And by the way, I am an alcoholic. I'm not an amateur. I'm the real deal. And so I didn't know that, of course, at the time. And finally, after playing around the big bands, I played some with Vaughn Monroe and different bands. And but Tommy Dorsey was the big deal for me. And
But Doc, you know, once you started drinking, how did you keep from falling into the abyss? I think that's what we want to know.
Well, I have to tell you about my first drink. I was about 5 years old. And it was during the Depression, and people had no money to go out and do anything. And in the town I lived in, there was no place to go to do anything anyway. So they all chipped in and bought a quart of whiskey and put it on the kitchen table. And then they went out and started playing the piano and singing songs and everything. And I walked in the kitchen and I saw them do that. And I said, I wonder what that tastes like. So I walked over there, 5 years old, took the lid off, took a shot of it, and it was pure rye whiskey. And I said, I really like that.
At 5, he likes.
I think Doc
That's
found
an
the
alcoholic.
abyss early. He
And-
found the abyss early, went down the abyss, and somehow made his way back out, and
made it
still
back
had
up.
40 years of life.
Yeah, I never got to the point of being in a gutter, but I came goddamn close, I'll tell you that. But what made me stop was I realized, well, you got a certain amount of talent here for this trumpet and you want to play in the big bands, but it's obvious that if you start fooling around with the booze, you're going to wind up like a lot of the guys you've met recently who are on their way out because they can't handle the booze. So that was when I had already gotten off to a nice start with the booze.
Right.
I saw a lot of great musicians in New York City that you see them and then you don't see them around for 6 months and you find out they're in a home someplace. And I
know
said,
that. Yeah.
no, I'm not going to go there. And whatever talent I have, I'm sure not going to ruin it, but by booze. But then I found out there were some drugs that I could use as a replacement. And it was the same story all over again. Then I had to do it with that. And then the day finally came when Bobby Haggart and his wife Wendy. Now, Bobby Haggart played bass in the Tonight Show band, and he was the co-creator of the Bob Crosby band. His biggest hit song that he ever wrote, I think, was "What's New," and which is one of my all-time favorites. And then South Rampart Street Parade. And I used to work with him on jazz gigs. And he never said a thing to me about my drinking, but it was picking up steam. And one time, then he and his wife, Wendy, invited me to come out to their house for the weekend out on Long Island. They had a house on Fire Island. And so I went out there and they gave me the pitch. And
Wow.
on the way home from Fire Island, I stopped in a liquor store, bought a 6-pack of beer, and went home, went downstairs to practice, opened a can of beer, took one drink, and I said, no, this ain't gonna work. And I threw it all out, and that was the last drink I ever had.
You know, it's an interesting point that you make, though, about the film, because obviously, you know, we could have delved much more into Doc being involved with alcohol and drugs. And you know what? The thing that Jeff and I realized pretty early on, because, you know, we know that's good territory for a documentary. People are interested. They're interested in a good story of survival and getting past their demons. But the truth of the matter is when you get to know Doc, he may have been involved with drugs and alcohol. He may be an alcoholic, but that doesn't define who he is.
For sure.
What defines who he is and what comes out across in the film is Doc is a trumpet player.
Right.
He started out by saying that, and neither Jeff nor I can tell you how much he means it. That's what he is. He's a trumpet player.
Let me ask you something else, Doc. You know, you were mentioning all these bands, which I grew up idolizing and had their records. And one of the things that's interesting, all the Dorseys and Goodman and James and most of these bands, they're all fronted by white men. And a lot of people think jazz is a Black cultural creation. And, you know, I'm just wondering, back in the day when you were doing all this, how did race play out? Did you think, I don't see race is irrelevant? Did you think, you know, we're working in something that really is a Black creation here at some level? How did race figure, if at all?
How much tape have you got?
Listen to
Yeah,
you
you're
talk
falling-
about race.
talk
and
about
this
the abyss. Yeah,
experience.
you're
We
falling
could
into
go
the
all
abyss
day,
here.
Doc. This is important and interesting. I'd love to.
I started with the booze, and when I said, no, I'm not going to be able to play the trumpet very well and make a real living doing this, Bob Haggart and his wife got me to stop. I drank that one can of beer. I took one drink, threw the rest of it out, and that was it. But at the same time, I found that marijuana and some other things were around that I was going to use for a substitute, and it didn't take me too long to figure out, no, I'm just going into deeper water here. So I just decided that if I wanted to have a career and be a good father, and bearing this in mind, my first wife was about the worst alcoholic that I ever met.
Seen the movie.
It's a movie, absolutely. That's
And
right, Kevin. You bring that out, which is good.
I think, you know, when you played in biracial bands, when you played in bands that were mixed black and white players, what was the camaraderie like? Was race an issue when you were all in the same band?
Well, I was raised in an all-white community of 600 people in the wilds of Eastern Oregon, and had no contact with Black people, but yet I felt simpatico with them. And sure enough, I got a call to go and join Charlie Barnett's band, and he was one of the very first white bands that hired quite a few Black guys. And so the next thing I know, I'm on the road with the Charlie Barnett band, and I was finding that my social life was all with the Black guys. I understood them, they understood me. And when we would get to a town, if I could stay where they stayed, which was for Blacks only, supposedly, I would go there. And I had some wonderful experiences through that in Washington, D.C. And it's, I had a chance to work with and live with and love Black people. And a strange thing, I left high school very quickly and I had to do my senior thesis. And at that time, it was just the start of the racial unrest. And I thought, I got to find something that I can find a lot of material on and write it and get it over with. Yeah, racism, that's what I'll do. And I went right from giving that to my high school principal to getting on a bus with a mixed band.
It's really interesting.
And
Jeff, we missed this story. How did we miss this story?
I know. This is one story you never told us. You told us everything except for that.
well,
We
that
should have
paper story,
listened to
Doc.
Brad when he said miniseries.
well,
No. I didn't
Always
say
listen to the editor.
I got to tell you a couple of stories about that, and you can throw it out if you want to. But when we got to Washington, D.C., I was surprised to find it's, to the Blacks, they called it Washington J.C., standing for Jim Crow. And so the white guys could go downtown and stay, and the Black guys would stay out in the Black section, and we played the Howard Theater there in the Black section, which is a very famous place. And Charlie Barnett was about the only white band that ever played there. There were some others, but so I chose to live out in the Black section. And I didn't want to create anything, or it just felt like that's where I belonged. And I met a woman named this story is making me forget it, but
Uh-oh.
she had a rooming house about a block away from the Howard Theater, and guys like Duke Ellington, Count Basie, all of those famous guys stayed there. And somebody told me about it, so I went over there, and the woman said, "Yeah, you could stay here. I've had a couple of white guys here, but you got to remember a few things. Don't go trying to hit on my girls who keep up the rooms and everything, and mind your manners." And what'd you say your name was? I said, Doc. And she said, "You ain't no doctor." And and
But my daddy is.
How'd she know? Yeah.
So I wound up living there, and boy, you want to talk about what an experience that was. 4 o'clock in the morning was your main meal of the day. After you've done all your show, you come back to the house, sit and have a few drinks with a lot of very famous Black people, sit around and talk. And they called me, they gave me a nickname. That's what I was frumping over there for a minute. They called me Young Blood. "Hey, Young Blood, how you doing, man?" And then they shortened it to Bleed. "Hey, Bleed, come on in here, sit down." And
both of those would have been good titles for the film too.
Yeah, that's really true, Jeff. That's really true.
And it was one of the most creative periods of my life. I knew what the whole racial thing was about. And so we're getting ready to leave Washington, D.C. to go on the road with in our bus to do concerts. And the bus was leaving from a white hotel downtown. So I went with the Black guys, and we showed up down there. We went into the coffee shop in the hotel to get just a cup of coffee. And we all sat down, and they said, "We don't serve Blacks." And I said, "What about me?" And I don't know what they said, but the guys got up and left, and I left with them. And that was the day that I found out what it feels like to be Black and to be insulted like that. And boy, I want to tell you, that's something you don't get over.
Yeah.
And my first wife, you know, she lived an adventurous life, and she had a love affair with a famous.
She was a groupie.
This wasn't in the movie either, Kevin.
No, this was not in the movie.
She was a little more than a groupie.
He says it a little classier.
Yeah, okay, I'm listening.
But anyway, she had a son by the famous trombone player J.C. Higginbotham, and then she had another son who was, I guess I adopted him, and it was just a wild feeling to be involved in. So anyway, in this drugstore, they said, you guys, we don't serve Blacks, but you can go down the street, there's a place. And so we went back outside, we stood by the bus, and you know, I remember the guys saying, "Ain't that a bitch? You believe that? Here we are in Washington, D.C. There's the Capitol right over there." It was so close. And I said, "Yeah, we're in the nation's capital and we can't get a cup of coffee because of race." And it was my first real introduction of what it feels like. The next one was a bit more touchy. And
Hey, that's Kathy for the people just
Yes. Hi,
joining.
Kathy. Welcome. Glad you're here.
Remember, Kathy's in the movie too.
Certainly is, prominently.
There we go. Make sure.
he's fixing the machine.
I hope.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, I won't go on with that. You asked the question.
Well, we'll get back to the movie.
No, this is, yeah, one of the things in the movie you talk about, there, as you've gotten older, there's technical things you can't do with the trumpet anymore that you could do at some points. And what I'm wondering is if anybody can understand that. Help us understand what, though, life experience brings to your playing. I understand you can't do certain things technically, but I would assume your playing has some dimension now after all this life experience that you couldn't have had at 18 or 28 or 35. How does your life experience, is it reflected in your playing now?
Well, when you're a musician, everything that happens to you from the day you come out of the womb till you pick up your first instrument and start becoming a musician is in your creativity. And I could sit down in and play the style of like a Duke Ellington band or Count Basie or Charlie Barnett, but I had to really work at it to be able to play what they played in the white bands. And I was much more comfortable with Charlie Barnett's band. That was, it was just natural for me.
I think one of the places in the film that really is a showcase for what you're talking about is the scene between Chris Bodie and Doc.
Right.
There you have two wonderful players, Chris pretty much in his prime and Doc. And when you hear the solos, you hear that reflected, because I think, while Chris obviously has the brashness of his age, Doc had a sweetness in what he played in that scene that really grabbed you, and so I think that's where maturity and sophistication and experience comes into the game. And when you can show it up against a guy like Chris Bodie, you still got your chops at 92.
That's one of my favorite moments in the movie, by the way. I'm glad you referenced that, Kevin. It's really well done, Brad. It's a really beautiful sequence. In terms of the movie, let me ask you guys who made the movie, when you look at it now, there must be moments that you look at it and you go, this isn't as good as I wanted it to be. I wish I'd gotten that a little bit better. And there must be other moments that you look at and you go, my God, this turned out well. I wasn't even aware of what we had here when we were shooting it. Do you have any do-overs, and do you have any moments that delightedly surprised you?
I'm curious if Brad wants us to do anything over.
Well, I mean,
he's the most objective.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, well, just to sort of add to the last question a bit, listening to Doc play Georgia, which is the arrangement and his solo in Georgia is just absolutely gorgeous. And Kevin and Jeff did not want to make a music film. It was, much more than that. So one thing I wish that we had the time for were to allow all of the songs to play out in their entirety. There was so much music to choose from, and to be able to listen to that, to the live performances, especially with the University of North Texas, Louisville, and the other groups that he played with, I mean, it's album quality material. So I wish that we were able to showcase the entirety of those songs.
Great.
Mini-series.
Yeah.
And I'll say that, we there's something from every single day of production in the film. We never had a day of production where it didn't make it in film, even if it was just a moment.
Right.
So there was gold every single day
How many days will you shoot for?
Oh, I wish I knew that off the top of my head.
Yeah.
How many?
It was like 38, roughly.
38?
Mm-hmm.
Something like that.
Wow, that's a lot.
I don't know. It could
Yeah.
be. It's
Yeah.
rough.
No, there was a lot of shooting, a lot of whole concerts that will be waiting for the extras on the DVD package.
Yes, I know. I want to see that. I definitely want to see that.
And the other moment that I wish
yeah,
we could have
please.
included was when Doc was riding the horse and jumped the fence.
Right.
Cameras were rolling,
right.
but you know.
Yeah, we missed that one.
I would have liked.
Nobody would believe it, so don't put it in.
You wait a minute. You mean you call that jumping a fence? Or was that,
All right, it was a stick.
It was a pebble. It was a pebble, Doc.
no, was that, you didn't have the footage in there of me at my one and only horse show, and I actually rode in a jumping show.
That's right.
Yeah, no, we had a photo. We had a still photo of that, but we didn't have any footage. You're right.
He did not jump. To be clear, he did not jump.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad.
Well, I did though. That was something I was determined to do when I saw my kids riding jumpers when they were growing up, and I said, boy, when I coming down to the end of the pike, and I don't have to worry about busting my chops falling off a horse, I'm going to do that. And I did, and I didn't fall off at all.
Oh, look
Bravo.
at that. There we go.
In fact, I won the championship for the horse show.
Wow.
It was I don't talk about that very often, but
Well, see, okay.
If you want to start another half hour, ask him about Mustangs.
Oh my God! Oh my God! You had to say the word.
We can tell you, just something that wasn't, but it was a big idea for us because Doc loves Mustangs. He really does. And, it's one of his dreams, and it's one of the dreams we're talking about trying to make come true in the film. And it kind of just got to a point where that was one of the things that just wasn't going to be possible. There was a lot involved to get to the Mustangs, and it was late in the game. So, but that would be the thing I wish, I think both Jeff and I, we were very attached to this image of somehow ending the film with Doc on a Mustang riding into the sunset.
Come on, why not? I get that.
Hey, listen, I'm willing.
But we did pretty well. I'm not disappointed in the least. But when you ask about, okay, what do you wish you might have been able to done? I think both Jeff and I had our eyes really and passion on that, but it was just too rough.
Yeah, I hear you. I got to ask one Johnny Carson question because people probably have lots. Doc, there's this sort of image of Johnny Carson that there's a huge gap between the public and the private, and that the public that I watched for 35 years and loved is very different from the private Johnny, who was presumably shy, lost a child, adult kid, multiple marriages, and that there's a sadness and poignance that belies the sort of public presence. And so we all know the public Johnny, but do you want to say something about how you understood the private Johnny?
Well, yes.
What do we not understand about him if we only watch the show?
Well, I don't know how many of you watched him quite a bit and then went blithely past the fact that he was just a kid from the Midwest, from a small town in Nebraska, and who happened to be hugely talented and went on to become very famous. But I'll tell you what, the real Johnny Carson was always lurking close by. And we had a sort of a a password for that. I've you know, and just in talking about it, it shakes me up so much I can't remember. But we had a name for guys that were like us from the country. Johnny was the country boy. It's hard to believe that as sophisticated as he was, that boy, you strip all of that off, and there was just a boy from Nebraska there.
Mm.
And but he was something special. I mean, you know,
Mm.
I got to be careful even.
Well, you two had a special relationship. I know.
Really do.
That's Doc's careful when he talks about Johnny because, you know, I'm just going to say it, Doc. Doc Severinsen loves, still does to this very day, loves Johnny Carson, and feels indebted to him. He's a brother to Doc. And I think, you know, in the best sense of being a brother, you never disparage, you never talk behind doors, you know, and I'll tell you that even on camera, Doc was very strong about that his relationship with Johnny was something that was very dear to him, and he would never say anything to disparage Johnny.
Yeah, on and off camera at all times.
Yeah, you know, I'm so glad you guys put in the movie that sequence, the Thanksgiving, you know, conversation, which is one of the all-time great bits on the Tonight Show. I mean, it's a classic appropriately.
Well, you know what?
Doc, you're just amazing in that sequence. You are drop dead funny.
Well, if you want to talk about it, I guess I'm glad you brought it up, but that was like a key to our relationship. We were both country boys,
right?
You know, if there was always that content between us. And I never realized the extent of my affection for him as a person, because we were so busy, you couldn't let your guard down for a minute. And, you know, I had my job, he had his job, and we all did our jobs. But when the show was over, and the day I found out Johnny had just died, his nephew called me at 7 a.m. and told me, and I found out how much I loved that guy.
That's a powerful moment in the movie, you guys. It's an important moment, and it's nicely done. Well, listen,
there were tears in that room when we were filming, for sure. We were all crying.
I bet, Jeff, absolutely. Listen, I want to thank all of you. Thank you for this. Thank you for bringing your wonderful movie. Thank you for having made your wonderful movie. Doc, thank you for having lived as Doc Severinsen.
Well, I kept trying to talk them out of it.
It's too late now, Doc.
They wouldn't listen to a thing.
Just go with the flow, baby.
Well, you know, we're just going to bring you back every year, and we'll do more of these.
Well, thank you for having us, and thank you for bringing us together for this little reunion.
Thank you for supporting the Virginia Film Festival, and thank you for that film.
We wish we could be there. We love Virginia Film
I wish
Festival.
I could be there as well, you know.
Send me a can of peanuts, please.
You guys be well. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Harry.
Yeah, take care. Thanks a lot.